Hilchos Shcheinim Perek Shnei Moser. So here the Rambam will be talking the next three prakim about the dinim, primarily about the dinim of bar mitzvah. Now the first basic din of bar mitzvah would be if you have two shutfim that divided a field together, they owned a field together and they divided it, or they were yarshim, there was their father's field and they divided it. So there could be two efanim, there could be one efan, that basically the field is the same field, the whole field is basically the same quality field. It's just that you have to divide it. The size of the field has to be divided into two parts. That would be one situation. There would be another situation where the quality of the field is not really the same, and therefore you have to assess. First, you have to make an assessment of the price of the field. In other words, you're going to have to divide the field, and one of them is going to get a better quality field. The other one will get a lesser quality field. Obviously, the lesser quality field will get more quantity, as he won't get as much quality, but he'll get more quantity, and the other one will have more quality and less quantity. So you have to assess that it should be in the same price rate, the same price for both sides of the field. Now, how do you divide the fields? Normally, when you make up, you say this is one parcel of land and the other one is another parcel of land, and they're both the same price. Either they're the same price because basically they're the same quality field and they're also the same size, or they're different qualities of field. So normally the seder is you make either they agree to each other if they agree, or if they don't agree, so then you make a geirel. So you make a geirel, and then according to the geirel, it decided who gets which part, which one of the shutfim get which part, and the other shutfim gets the other part. That's pashut. Now there's a chiddush over here that if what happens if one of the shutfim or one of the yarshim have another field, they have another field. And one of these pieces of land, in other words, you have two parcels of land, which was divided, and one of those parcels of land is next to the piece of land that one of the shutfim already have. So Mela, for him to get that piece of land, which is next to his property, would be an advantage, because like this, he'll have both his fields together. Mashenka, for the other one, it really makes no difference whether he gets this piece or that piece. So here it depends. If the two parcels of land are basically the same quality, it's just that they divided it into half. It was divided according to the quantity, and those according to the size. One got a half, and the other one got the other half. So then, basically, since they're both the same, so then if one of them has a piece of land next to one of those parcels of land, so he could claim and say, listen, for me it's an advantage to have this piece of land. For you, really, it makes no difference if you have this piece of land or that piece of land. So here we go with the principle of kaifan al midas daim. For me, it's a hanoah. For you, it's not a chsaron to have the other piece of land. So therefore, kaifan al midas daim, and therefore he gets that piece of land. So in other words, instead of going through the geirul process, he takes that piece of land because for him it's an advantage, and the other one doesn't lose. Masha'inkin, if the two pieces of land are not of equal quality, they both have the same price, but they're not of equal quality, so he can come along and say, listen, this piece of land is next to my land. Good. But lapel, the other piece of land is of a different quality. It could be there's a mile in the other piece of land over this piece of land. They're not of equal qualities. And therefore, you can't force the other person to agree that he should get that piece of land. That's the first halacha in Perek Shnei Moser. Perek Shnei Moser. Ha'achim yashutfin shebo lachlikas hasoda v'litul kolechet chalke. They're dividing the field, and each one is going to get their portion. Ism hoisa kula shava. Basically, the quality of the field was the same. The entire field was of basically the same quality. Ve'ein sham mokum teva mokum ra. There's no part of the field that's a good part or not a good part. Elakil echad. So first of all, so obviously you divide it according to the size. Now since it's all of equal quality, so memela you divide the field according to the size. Now vim amar echad mem, if one of them says snuli chelki mitzad zeh, in other words, we divided the field according to its size. Now I want to have this portion of the field, this parcel of land, kedei sheyisamuch l'sadar achar shali v'hi akil sadar achas, because since I own another piece of land, I own another field next to that field. You know, there's two parcels of land, and one of those parcels are next to my field. So therefore, I would like to have that parcel because then I'll have two fields together. So we listen to him. And we can't say to the other person. The other person can't say no. I don't want to agree. And if you want me to agree, maybe you have to pay me for it. We say no. For him to prevent this from happening would only be a midas daim, because zen nana, this person that's asking for this to be done, is a nana because he has that other piece of land, and the Vaili is going to have two pieces of land together, and the other person is a lei chaser. He's not losing anything, because for him there's really no difference, this piece of land and that piece of land. That's talking about if both pieces of land was of equal quality. There was differences in these two parcels of land, but one of them was a better piece of land. It was more idious. A car of Lenorius, it was closer to the river, so it's easier to irrigate. A car of Lederach, closer to the road, so therefore it's easier to travel. And Vishamu Eise Hayofa Keneged, when they assessed the two pieces of land, they didn't only assess it by size, they assessed it according to value. And one of them is a smaller piece of land, and it has or has other advantages. It's next to a river, next to a road, and the other one doesn't have those advantages. So when they divided the land, it wasn't only according to size; it was according to the value. And now, now one of them is saying, "Tunuli b'shuma shalim etzadzeh, give me my piece of land on this side, because I have a field there." So he says, "Yeah, you have a field there, but the two pieces of land are not of equal quality, and therefore I want to have that piece of land." So then is ein shemli. So then a person is ein shemli, because that's not already midas daim to say I want dafka this piece of land. Eleneitel begedel. So he takes begedel. Now what happens if you have two pieces of land? One of them is better and one of them is not as good. And this person is coming along and saying, "Listen, I am willing to take half." In other words, let's divide the field in half. In other words, in size, we'll divide the half and half. And I will get the half of the size of the field from the part that's not as good. So millions come out, you're going to get half of the land, as if it would all be the same. The emes is the part that you're getting is a better piece than what I'm getting. But we'll divide it, I'm asking to divide it as if there was no better and worse. So you're going to end up having half of the amount of the land. In other words, as far as quantity is concerned, you will have half of the land, and in your half, there's also going to be the better part of the land. So maybe you're not losing out at all. You're only gaining. And I want that in that part of my land, which is the worst part, which is only half of the quantity, which is next to a field that I already own, I want to have that field. So in other words, I'm being mevater. I'm saying I'm going to get less of the value of the land, but I want that the land that I will get will be next to the karka that I'll get. That's this din. Amr lem. If one of them tells to the other, Tnuli chatzi midasa min hatzad hara b'lei shuma. I want to have only half of the quantity of the land, not the quality. In other words, we're not going to divide it according to the value. Let's not divide it according to the value. And you're going to be getting a greater value. Because Lepil, you're getting the better half. You're getting the better half, but even a small part of your better half is worth as much as the entire not such good half. But Lepil, I'm not taking the entire not such good half. I'm only going to take half of the quantity of the land. I'll deal with this land as if it's all the same quality. So Memela, if it would be all the same quality, so then I'd be able to take half and demand that I should get this piece because it's next to my karka. The mice is it's not really the same quality. It's really the part is the better quality the other person's getting. But so I'm saying, you know what? Let's make believe that it's not a better quality. Let's make believe this is all the same quality, and it'll all be to your advantage. You're going to get half of the quantity, and in that half of the quantity, there will also be that part which is of greater quality, which gives it greater value, and I will act as if it's the same. So that's what he's saying. Give me half of the quantity of the field from the part that's not so good. Without assessment, we're not going to use any assessments. I'm going to just take half of the quantity, and I'm going to be taking the part that's not so good. And v'tul atom itzad you take half of the quantity from the good side. And what's my interest? I want to have my portion next to my field. So I'd rather have something which is really of lesser value. I'm ending up getting from this chalukah a lesser value, but lepel I'm getting half of the quantity of the original field, and that's going to be next to my field, and that's my maila. even though I know that the part that I'm getting is worth less. So Heiru mixes Hagoyim Shcheinim. Because Lepel, the fact that he gets getting better quality, if it wouldn't have been better quality, he would have been able to tine it. And he's tining that I'll deal with you as if it's not better quality. So in other words, so what's the tine fakert? So Mimela, therefore, he could tine it that, listen, I'm only going to take half of the field, and you're going to get the other half, which has completely the whole half of the quantity, plus you're going to have also a better quality, and as part of it, and Mimela, and I'm gonna move out there because I'm interested in having it next to my field. So Heiru mitzvah ge'enim sheshemule. It's also it's kefen al midas name. What are you losing? You're only gaining. Now this the only deal would be on this that lechura this person getain. I'm not interested in a matana. So that would be the deal because lepel he's getting more than the chalukah. He's getting more of the value of his portion, whereas he owned something together with someone else. He was really entitled only to get half of the value. The Pele ended up getting more than half of the value. But nevertheless, the Rambam paskins that this person Ketaina, that I want to just take half of the quantity of this field, and that should be next to my field. And Lepel, the half of quantity of my field that I'm taking, is worth less than what you're taking, because Lepel, in the half of the quantity of the field that you're taking, there's also parts which is of greater quality. That's the number one. Halacha beis, habcher shecholak, a bcher is entitled to two portions, so the din is noitel shnei chalakim shlei keachad. He takes his two portions together. Now over here, even though Mashal this 5 brothers, and the portions aren't equal portions, they're equal in value, but not equal in quality. They're different types of portions. Nevertheless, the bcher is entitled to get both his portions together, because we learn out of the pasuk it says pishnayim, so we learn out that the two portions come together. So that's going to get a bcher that gets two portions. Aval hayavam shechol lakim echov b'nichse yoav. You have a yavam. The din is a yavam that dies, and Achmed to say a brother, one of the brothers died, and one of the brothers went ahead and was miyabn his wife. So he's entitled to his chelik of the Yerusha. He's entitled to his chelik of Yerusha. Now the din is, Bam, is just the din is that if Lemashal, the brother died, and he died b'chaye of his father. He died b'chaye of his father. So you have Yankov is the father, and Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are the sons. So now Reuven died. Now Shimon went ahead and was miyabn Eshes Reuven. Reuven died without children, and Shimon went ahead and was miyabn Eshes Reuven. And now Yaakov died, so Shimon is not really entitled to Reuven's portion in Yankov's Yerusha, because since Reuven never yarshened it was only Roy, it wasn't Muchzik, so therefore Shimon is not entitled to Reuven's portion in Yankov's Yerusha. When would Shimon be entitled to Reuven's portion in Yankov's Yerusha? Would be only in a case where Yankov died b'chaye of his sons, he died earlier, and Lepel they didn't divide the Yerusha, and then Reuven died. So now Reuven died. So Reuven Bambus was already a Yerush of Yankov. So now Reuven died. So now Shimon goes ahead and is Miyabim Eshes Reuven. So Shimon is entitled to Reuven's Yerusha. Shimon is entitled to Reuven's Yerusha. Now that's a separate din. So Shimon is entitled to the Yerusha of Yankov mitzat Shimon, and now he's also entitled to the Yerusha of Reuven's Yerusha in Yankov. So since they're two separate people, so in Mela, they're not together. Now, if the Maggid Mishnah talks out, if Lepel, they're equal portions, L'mashal Yankov left a field, and that field had 3 equal parts. They were all equal. They were divided only according to the quantity. So again, just like in the previous case, when you have Shutfim, so one could insist to have it next to his, because Lepel, it's Kefen al Midas name. So over here also, he would be able to insist, listen, I got a portion as a son of Yankov. Now I'm getting another portion as a Yavam, which I was Miyab Reuven's wife. So Mela, I'm getting the other portion. I want it to be next to my portion. That wouldn't be a problem. The problem would be is if it wouldn't be equal portions. So there wouldn't be equal portions, and therefore mitzat the dinim of Midas Daim, you can't taina, I want to have this Yerusha. Because Lepel, we say, good, you want to have this Yerusha, would be better for you. But Lepel, they're not equal parts. And Mamela is better for us. We want to have this piece. No, so you can't come along and taina, I want to have this piece dafka. This piece dafka. because that's already verbunden with a girdle. So therefore, they could insist it's going to be a girdle who's going to get this piece, because this piece is special. Each piece is special. They're not all of equal value. It's nachamol. So when we're dealing with a pcher, and the pcher gets two parts, so even though the parts aren't of equal value, but lepel, since the pcher, the pasuk says pishnayim, so therefore he's entitled to get both parts together. Mashenkin a yavam, there's no din of pishnayim. A yavam is this yavam is yashning his father because he's a son of his father, and he's also yashning. He's taking the deceased brother's part because he's a yavam. So it's like two dinim he's having. And since we're dealing with pieces, parts of the land, which are not equal parts, so therefore he can't have a right to insist that they should be together. Let's read again inside. Halacha beis. Habcher shecholak. You have a pcher that divided with the other brothers, so the din is noitel shnei chalakim shlei kechad. So he takes both portions together, and that we learn out from a pasuk because it says that he takes pishnayim. So pishnayim we learn out that the shnayim are together. Aval hayavam shecholak im echad b'nichsei av. But a yavam that he divided with his brothers b'nichsiyav, and again, the way the yavam divides with his brothers b'nichsiyav is only if his father died before the yavam died. If the yavam dies after the father dies, I'm sorry, fakert. If the yavam dies after the father dies, if the yavam would have died before the father died, so he wouldn't have been entitled to the yavam's yerusha in aviv, because that would be roy, it wouldn't be mugzik. Masha'enkin, if the father first died, there was no chalukas hayerusha. So all, let's say, three brothers had a right to the Yerusha, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And now Reuven died, and Shimon went ahead, and it was Miyab Meishis Reuven. So Shimon now, when he divides the Yerusha of Yankiv, so there's, on one hand, he's entitled to the Yerusha of Yankiv because he's entitled to Yerusha because he's a son. And now he's entitled also to Reuven's portion in the Yerusha of Yankiv because he's being Miyab his wife. And now there's a Levi, there's a third brother. So there's three parts over here. There's three parts. Now the question is, now Shimon comes along and says, I want to have my two parts together. He wants to have his two parts together. So if the three parts are mamash of equal parts, as we said before, so Mameli has taka right to Taina, I want to have all three parts together. My two parts together. Mashenkin, if they're not equal parts, so Levi could say, no, I want that part because Lepil, that part is a better part. So you're not entitled to take that part because it's next to your part. Because Lepel, I would like to have that part. That part is a different type of part. So therefore, over here it goes up here gedel. So that's the netel chelke v'chelik achav bagedel. Aval hayav mishacholek mechav v'nichseyav is netel chelke v'chelik achav bagedel. Imolu makom echad olu. Imolu b'shtei mekemis is also olu. And he can't insist that he wants to have dafka those two mekemis together. Halacha gimel. Eretz merubas, if you have an area which is square, it doesn't have to be exactly square, it could be rectangle. Shahaya hanor makiflo mizrach v'tzofen. It had a river on its east side and it's on its north side. V'haderech darim u'mayrev, and there was a road on the west and on the south. Now there's a mile of being next to a river and there's a mile of being next to a road. So over here you have on two sides there's a road, and on two sides there's a river, and you want to ensure that each one should get both miles. So what you do is you divide it diagonally. In other words, you make a diagonal line from the northeast to the southwest. So in Mela, each one will get a portion. This one will get a portion on the east, and therefore he will have that river, and he'll also get a portion on the south, so he'll have the road. The other one will have a portion on the north, so you'll have the road, the river, and it'll have a portion on the west, which will be the road. So Mela, if you make this division, so Mela, each one gets Saya road and Saya river. Nachamol. Eretz merubas, you have a square piece of land. Shayanor makivla mizrach v'tzofen, on the east and on the north there's a river, and v'haderech, and on Darim u'mayrev, and on the west and on the south there's a road. So chilk neiseba'alachs, and you divide it diagonally, and in a way, so the diagonally goes, the diagonal line goes from northeast to southwest. So now we divided it, each one got a road and a river and a road and a river. Now we learned before that if they're divided equally, in other words, it's the same type of land, and they divided equally, so then one of them could claim that he would like to have one of those portions because that portion is next to his field. So over here also, since it's basically an equal division, each one is getting a parcel of land which has both a river adjacent to it and also a road. So therefore, if one of them has a piece of land next to that one of those parcels, so he could tie. I want to have this parcel of land because that's for me a benefit. It's not for you. For you, it makes no difference because you have no piece of land in either side. For me, I have a piece of land on this side. So therefore, for me, it's a benefit to have this piece of land next to my other piece of land. Therefore, Vim Amar Tnuli Achetzi Shemitzadze, give me this side of this parcel of land, the half which is on this side. Why do I want the Shubitzat Sadi? Because it's next to my other field. Is Shemule. Kloli Shel Dover, Kol Dover, Shuhu Tevel Zev, Ein Al Chaveri Hefset Klal, something that this person will gain and the other person won't lose, is Kefen Esilasus. You're forced to, that's the din of Kefen I'll be the same. You can't say, listen, for you it's a benefit, and for me it's taka no loss, but I don't want to do it anyways. I I have a right to insist that I want to have a girl. I want to have insisting a girl. And could be that insisting to have a girl could be able to take out money from the other person. The other person will have to pay for it. Whereas if he wants to have that benefit, which is a benefit for him and not a loss for me, let him pay for it. So that would be like, using the opportunity to be able to take out money from him. And in reality, that you lose nothing by that person getting it and you getting the other thing. So the din is, that's part of the din of Kefen Al Midas Dame, that you can't use the opportunity to be able to take out money from that other person unjustifiably. Halacha Dalet. Echad minoachim emin ashutfim shemachar chelke leacher. So in other words, they all have portions in this land. In other words, they have portions of the land. They didn't yet divide the land, and one of them went ahead and sold his portion to someone else. He sold his portion to someone else. So the din is misalkin asalekech. The other shutfim or the other yarshim could go ahead and be misalik, the person that bought this portion. And v'nesli shara'achem eshara shutfim dom shanosim ve'elech kadeshli kodesh zorbinei. In other words, they're saying we're partners already. We are originally partners, or we're yarshim, and now one of these partners or one of the yarshim went ahead and sold his portion, and we're not interested in a new partner or a new person that we're going to have to deal with. We want to deal with each other. So Mela, since that person sold his portion, we want to go ahead and take that portion for ourselves. In other words, he basically wanted to sell the portion. So Aldera, just like over here, before we were saying you could insist that you want to have this portion, because this is better for you. So over here also, it's better for them to have this portion. Elamai, that person paid for it. So you'll reimburse him the money that he paid. Like we'll see by Hemshech, that if someone buys a field which is adjacent to someone else's field, a new person comes along and buys. Reuven and Shimon have fields next to each other. And Reuven sold his field, and now to Levi. So Shimon could go to Levi, as we'll learn in Halacha Hey, Shimon could go to Levi and say, listen, I'm next to Reuven. And Memela, for me to have Reuven's field is more important than for you having Reuven's field. You could have any field. But for me to have Reuven's field is important because like this, I'll have two fields next to each other. So therefore, even though you paid for it, I'm going to reimburse you for the money you paid. And thereby, take that field. You'll have the money back and go buy yourself another field, and I'll take this field. That's the idea. That's the basic din of bar mitzvah, where a person, since he's bordering on that field, so therefore he can insist that the field should be sold to him. As we'll learn by him, so that's the Nakud of the halacha. So Aldera's over here. Over here, since we are partners here, or we are Yorshim together, and this person went ahead and he sold the field, so really he could have sold the field to us. He could have sold his portion to us, and that would have been fine. But now he went ahead and sold it to someone else. So we're saying, no, it's better for him to sell it to us because we're partners and we're Yorshim, and therefore we'll reimburse you the money that you had, and you go buy yourself a field elsewhere. And for us, it's better to have this field because this is part of our partnership or part of our inheritance. Halacha Hey, V'lei, that's a V'lei, the furthermore in this din. In other words, the first din, Halacha Daled, really, we started from the beginning, that this person was inheriting a field, and the question was, which field should he inherit? So we say that he's saying, I want to inherit this field because Lepel, this field is next to my other field. So therefore, that gives him a right to go ahead and inherit this field. In other words, he's going to have to inherit one of the fields. In other words, he's going to get one of the fields. He says, I want this field as opposed to the other field because Lepel, For me, it's a benefit to have this field, and for you, it makes no difference. That was the din of halacha aleph and base. And then now we had an halacha daled. If people were together, and they're partners, and now this person went ahead and has sold this part of his partnership to someone else. So the partners can say, "Listen, we're not interested in a new partner." So Mamela, this person will give you the money that you paid for being part of this partnership, and Mamela, we're going to be again part of this partnership. Again, that's a gather of a sisatei v'ayosher. In other words, this new person that's entering this partnership, he doesn't really have to go into this partnership. He can go elsewhere. For us, it's important to have this field, to have this chelik, and therefore we're insisting that we should have it. Now we're going to have another case where a person is a neighbor. So in the first case, I'm anyways getting something. Question is what I should get. In the second case, halacha daled, it's more than that. I'm already a partner, and I don't want a new partner coming in here. In halacha hey is v'lei eid is even a bigger chiddush. So in other words, I have no shaykhs here. Reuven and Shimon are partners, are neighbors rather, not partners. They're neighbors, and Shimon owns a field. So l'chura Shimon has the right to sell it to whoever he wants. And Levi went ahead and bought a field from Shimon. So on that, Reuven is coming along and saying, "Listen, Shimon had a field next to me. He wanted to sell the field. For me, it's more important to have this field than for Levi. Levi can buy any field. But for me, to have this field is going to be an advantage because I have the other field next to him. So therefore, I want to be Masalik Levi, and I buy the field. That's like even a bigger chiddush on this chiddush. Halachei, v'lei eid, ela mecher karka shalei la'acher. Someone goes ahead and sells his field to someone else. Is yesh lechaveri shubet sadametza shalei, the person that's on his border, in other words, that's a neighboring field, litein domim l'lekech, he could go ahead and give money to the buyer, u'lesalekesei, and to send him away. In other words, that he's no longer going to be the owner of this field. V'zeh lekech harochik, and we're going to look at this person that went ahead and bought this field. In other words, the person that wasn't the neighbor, that went and bought the field, ki'ilu hu shliach shel ben hametzah. We'll look at him as if when he bought the field, he was a shliach of the ben hametzah. And the idea is that he doesn't really have to make a new kinyan. Whereas normally when you want to acquire something, you have to make a kinyan. If your shliach made an acquisition for you, so you don't have to make a new kinyan. Over here, you're going ahead and giving money to this lekeach, really against his will, and we're looking at this lekeach as if he made the acquisition on behalf of the neighbor. As if he was the shliach of this neighbor. Bein shemacherhu, whether the person himself, the original person, the owner of the field, sold it. Bein shemacher shluchi, whether he sold it, his shliach sold it. Bein shemachru bezin, whether a bezin sold it. Either in any of these three cases, whether the owner of the field sold it, in other words, Shimon himself sold it, or a shliach of Shimon sold it, or bezin sold it for Shimon, is yesh beidin ben hametzah. So there's a din of ben hametzah, which means that Reuven, which is the neighbor, could go ahead to the buyer and say, "Listen, this field is something more important for me than for you, and therefore I'll give you the money you paid for it, and I will take the field." And afilu haya lekech talmud chacham v'shachin. In other words, the l'chura de lekech is someone that's more important that he should have it, let's say, or he would have gedima in certain things. Even if the lekech was a talmud chacham or he was a shachin, he was a neighbor, not a neighbor in the field, but he was a neighbor in other things. In other words, they dealt together with each other. Or v'karev lemecher, so he was either this buyer was a talmud chacham, or he was a shachin, which means a neighbor, or someone involved with him in other inyanim, or he was a relative to the mecher. Uben hametzer, and the person that had the neighboring field is an amhoretz and he's a rachik, is nevertheless ben hametzer kodim umesalik is halekech. Nevertheless, the person that's the neighbor could go ahead and send away the lekech and take the field from the lekech and reimburse the lekech for what he paid. V'davar zeh mishum shenamar vasisa yoshev atev. This is learned from the pasuk vasisa yoshev atev. Amru chacham heil v'mecher echadu. As far as the seller is concerned, it makes no difference if he's selling it to the neighbor or he's selling it to this other person. It's proper that the person that's the neighbor should buy the field rather than this person that's not a neighbor. Because for the neighbor, it's an advantage to have this field because you have two fields together. And for the other person, there's no advantage. So why does he have to buy this field? He can buy another field. Now, if the Bnei HaMetzah were Rabbim, in other words, there was a number of neighbors, there wasn't only one neighbor to this field, there were a number of neighbors, is Kulam Zeichem Bezuach Sadan Imkeres. They all have rights to buy this field, to take this field, And therefore, v'hi b'neim l'fnim minyanim. So we're talking about in a case where someone went ahead and bought this field. He bought this field. In other words, Reuven and Shimon and Levi are Reuven is a neighbor with Shimon and Levi. They both are neighbors on Reuven's field. And now Reuven went ahead and he sold the field to Yehuda. So Yehuda bought the field. So now Shimon and Levi both have a right to tell Yehuda, why did you buy the field? We want the field. We're neighbors to the field. Now if Shimon and Levi both come to Yehuda with the taina, so then the field, so they both pay Yehuda for whatever he paid, and then they both get the field. That's this. There were a number of neighbors to this field that was sold. Is kulam zeichem bezu asudim keres. They could all be zeich in this field that was sold. He be named lifni minyanim and v'nesim and adam lekech, and they pay whatever the money that the lekech paid. They divide equally amongst themselves and they pay him. Abavahu, this din that they all get this field. In other words, as the case we said, Reuven and Shimon were neighbors, and Lepel, Shimon went ahead and sold this field, but Shimon went ahead and sold this field, but the M is not only, Reuven and Shimon and Levi were neighbors. So Reuven had a field, and Shimon and Levi were neighbors of Reuven's field, and now Reuven went ahead and sold this field to Yehuda. So the din is that Shimon and Levi could go to Yehuda and claim, no, we want to have this field. Because Lepel, we're neighbors to this field. We're neighbors to this field. So if they both come at the same time to the Lekech, so then they both reimburse the Lekech, equally they reimburse the Lekech, and then they both get the field. Masha'enken, if only one of them came with the Taina, only one of them came with the Taina, if they both came together to this buyer, and they claim, why did you buy it? We have first rights, so they have first rights, and they together reimburse the buyer, and they take the field. But if one of them came first, and he was the one that pushed away the lekech, and he said, listen, why did you buy it? I'm a neighbor, and therefore I want to buy it, and he gave all of the money to the buyer, is Zachaba Levadi. So this neighbor, even though he's not the only neighbor, there's another neighbor, Zachaba Levadi. Hail v'hu ben ha-meitzer. V'chein bo miksasim, u'miksasim din acheres. There's a number of neighbors, and some of the neighbors came, and the other neighbors didn't come. Is always misalkin Elohim din kam belvad v'hilahem. The people that are standing here, they're the ones that are misalik this buyer, and they're the ones that get it. In other words, the person that comes along and claims it, so he's the one that gets it. Even though the other one, if he would have come also together, he would have also gotten it. V'chein, so we're talking about over here a case where a person sold it to another person, and now these neighbors are coming and taking it away from the buyer. So the din is, if all the neighbors come, so then they divide it equally. If only some of the neighbors come, so then they divide it equally. Now the same thing, what would be if there was never another buyer? The person owns a field, and he's selling it to one of the neighbors. There's more than one neighbor. There's more than one neighbor. He decided to sell it to one of the neighbors. So when you sell it to one of the neighbors, the other neighbor can't have any tainus. If you sell it to a fremder person, so then you have tainus. And if they both come together with tainus, so they both divide it. Masha'enken, if he goes ahead, Reuven has two neighbors, Shimon and Levi, and he went ahead and sold his whole field to Shimon. So Levi doesn't have any tainus. Why did you sell it why did you sell it to Shimon? L'churi, you could have sold it to me. Lepeil, since Shimon is also a neighbor, so therefore Reuven has a right to sell his entire field to Shimon. Someone that's actually a shutif, even though he's not a neighbor. But here the Rambam is saying a new din, that if a person is a shutif, he's a partner in his business, so he also has a right to buy his field, even though he's not a neighbor of the field. Even though they don't really have any partnership in the karka, but they're partners in business. Is zachaba, so this person is zecha, ve'ein shar hashutfim, ishar b'nei hametzer, neitin menu. Now, the Gemara doesn't say this din that a shutfim b'masu matan also overrides the din of Bametzra. The Gemara says shutef. So Rashi learns over there that shutef means a shutef in the karka. And the Rambam learns that even a shutef b'masu matan also overrides the din of Bar Metzra. Halacha vav. Hamoicher kol nechasav elecha. Now the din of Bar Metzra, the pshat is that you have a person who owns a field and he wants to sell the field. Now he has a neighbor, which that neighbor, for him, it's a big advantage to have the field. And then there's this other person going and buying the field. So the Tevi Yosher is, why sell it to this other person, which for him it's not such a great gain to have this field. He could have had another field. Sell it to the person that's your neighbor, and to him it'll be a greater gain. Now the question is, there's a shaila and havana sadvarim. What's the gather of asisa yoshev atev? Is the gather of asisa yoshev atev a din kilu in the lekech, that the lekech has to let the neighbor buy the field? The lekech, even if he bought the field, he has to let the neighbor to buy the field, because for him it's better that he should have the field rather than for him having the field. So the vasisa yoshev atev is more under lekech. Or as a result of this din of vasisa yoshev atev, the actual neighbor has a certain kinyan and a schus to insist that this field is his. It's not only a din that the lekech should be nice about it, and he's mechuyev to be nice about it, kilu kefen al midas dain, and memela he has to let the neighbor pay him the money and take the field. It's kilu that the neighbor actually has a kinyan on the field. He has a kinyan on the field, and as a result of the kinyan on the field, therefore he has the rights. He has like the first rights. The fact that he's a neighbor gives him first rights to this field, that when the moicher sells the field and there's no other factors involved, so he should get the field. That's the shaila. It's negela nafkala amnina la'alacha. The Rebbe learns over there. It's machlekes Rashi and the Rambam. But I'll call upon him. The din is that the havon of this din of bar metzra is vasisa yoshev atev. Now, if there's no difference for the moicher, in other words, the moicher has no difference. He could have sold it to this lekech, he could have sold it to this lekech. So now the lekech comes along, the bar metzra comes along, and he says to the lekech, I mean, why did you buy it? Why did you buy it? L'chura, I should buy it. When the moicher should have sold it to me. I'll call upon him. The din is I can be masalik the lekech and take it for myself, the bar metzra, and we look at the lekech as if he was a shliach on behalf of the bar metzra. But medvar mamurim, if there was no advantage in this inyan of him selling it to this person, masha'inkin, if the moicher had some type of an advantage of selling it to this person rather than to the bar metzra, so then the whole din of bar metzra doesn't apply. So the mashal of the moicher didn't sell just this field; he sold all his fields. So there was one package deal; he sold all his fields. Amongst all his fields was also this field. So you can't come to the moicher and say, "Listen, or why did you sell him the field? You should have sold me the field." I didn't sell this field. I didn't sell this field on its own. I sold this field as part of a package deal. Memela, since I sold it as a package deal, so the whole din of bar metzra doesn't apply. Halacha vav. Hamoicher kol nechosav le'achad. The person went ahead, the seller went, and he sold all his assets. Is ein bala metzra shel soda achas misalik zalekech meisa soda. The bar metzra of one of the fields can go ahead and say, I want this field, to go to the buyer. He didn't buy this field separately. He bought this field as a package deal. So since he bought it as a package deal, and he doesn't have rights to the other fields, so in Mela he can't be masalikim from this field as well. Someone sold a field to the original owners. So Reuven and Shimon were neighbors, and now Reuven went ahead and sold the field back to the original owners. So Shimon can't come along and say, listen, I'm the bar metzra, why did you buy the field? He bought the field because it was originally his field. He wanted to buy his field back. Or someone buys a field from a goy, so the goy lavdafke, you buying something from a goy is like lahatzel miyadeh. So Mela now the bar metzra is going to say, well, why did you buy it from the goy? I could have bought it from the goy. So we say no, by a goy doesn't go on this din of bar metzra, and therefore if you bought it from the goy, it's yours. If you bought it from the goy, it's yours, and therefore ein by din ben hametzra. Halacha zayin hamoicher ligoy. Before we were talking about a person bought it from a goy. Someone bought it from a goy, and now the neighbor of the goy is claiming, why did you buy it from the goy? I could have bought it from the goy. So since you bought it from a goy, a goy is considered, Marisa is considered like mavriach hari, I'm sending away a lion, and therefore the whole din of bar metzra doesn't apply. Now what happens if a person sold to a goy, hamoicher ligoy, so the din is mishamten oisay, you put this person in chayrim, you make a chayrim on him, achi yikabel olav kol oines shiyavim in a goy. Whereas by having lepel, he sold it to a goy, and now, so this guy is a neighbor of a Yid. There's a Yid, and the Yid was a neighbor. So Reuven and Shimon were neighbors. Now, Shimon went ahead and sold his karka to a guy. So Lepel, now Reuven has a guy as a neighbor. Now there's a concern that since he's a guy as a neighbor, he may deal with him in a way that's shlei al pidin. In other words, if he would have had a Yid as a neighbor, so then he would have been able to mon that it should be al pitera. Masha'inke, now that he has a guy for a neighbor, so he may deal with him shlei al pidin, and therefore Reuven will get hazekas from it. So Shimon had no right really to do that, to go ahead and sell a piece of karka which was neighboring with another Yid, to sell it to a Goy, and therefore Shimon has to accept upon himself any possible hazekis which could come to Reuven as a result of the fact that it was sold to this Goy. Hamoicher l'Goy. Someone sells a piece of property to a Goy. There's mishamton. They say achi yekabel olav kol oinus shiyavi min hagoy. All to any oinus shiyavi min hagoy that could possibly be achi yinig hagoy and ben hametzah shalei b'din Yisrael bakel. In other words, unless the Goy will deal with the Yid b'din Yisrael and everything, so that's fine. Mashenkin, if the Goy will deal with the Yid in a way that's not kedina Yisrael, and as a result of that, the Yid will have a loss, the neighboring Yid will have a loss, so this seller has to accept upon himself that any loss that his neighbor will have as a result of the fact that he has a neighbor, a Goy, which he caused, he will reimburse him. Yisrael is mishalim hamecher. If he's going to force him to do something, in other words, in a way that he's going to lose something, this neighbor, shalei kedin Yisrael, so this seller has to accept upon himself. Halacha ches haschirus ein bashum mishum din ben hametzer. So if a person rents out a piece of property, for example, to someone, and now the neighbor comes along and says, why did you rent it out to him? You should have rented it out to me. The whole din of schirus. By schirus, there's no din of ben hametzer. When a person sells something, so you could tell him, why did you sell it to him? You should have sold it to me. And therefore, he could go ahead and push away the lekech. Masha'in kain, if there's it's only schirus, there's no din of ben hametzer. Halacha tes. Hamemashkin mokim, so we're learning all kinds of cases, although there's a general din of bar metzra, but we're learning different cases where the din of bar metzra doesn't apply. So in other words, the general din of bar metzra is that the neighbor kataina to the buyer, I want to have the field. The field for me is more important than for you, and therefore I will reimburse you and you give me the field. That applies only if you bought it from a Yid. Mashenkin, if you bought it from a Goy, this din of bar metzra doesn't apply. That was din number one. It also doesn't apply if the seller sold all his assets together and part of the assets was also this field. So again, the din of bar metzra doesn't apply. And now we also learned that if you rented out the field and this neighbor comes along and says that I want to be the one that's renting out the field, so again, the din of bar metzra doesn't apply. Now we're learning a new din, that if the person that you sold it to, he wasn't, you're the bar metzra, you have a neighboring field, but this person, let's say Reuven and Shimon, Reuven has a field, Shimon has a field, and Shimon borrowed money, and now from Levi, and Levi he had the mashkin of this field. This field was memushkin biyad Levi. There was a musik, he had a mashkin, this field was a mashkin for him for this loan that he had, that he lent to Shimon. And now Shimon eventually sold the karka to Levi. But originally it wasn't Stamazé. Levi just came along and Shimon sold him the karka. Levi had this karka as a mashkin. And then eventually Shimon sold the karka to him. So again, over here, since Levi already had this karka as a mashkin, so therefore the din of bar metzra doesn't apply. That's how mashkin mokim. He was memashkin the place. V'achar kach mochrei lezeh shehu memushkin biyodei is ein bei mishum din ben hametzra. The din of ben hametzra doesn't apply. V'chein hamoicher mokim rochek kedei legal mokim karev. There's a place that he sold a certain place, and he wants to generate money in order to get that place back. That place is a place which is close to him. So he has two pieces of property, one that's far and one that's close. He needed money, so he went ahead and sold the piece of property that was close. But now he wants to redeem that piece of property that's close, and Mamela, he's selling a piece of property that's far in order to generate money to be able to redeem that property that's close. So the Moicher is pressed that he wants to go ahead and get money in order to be able to redeem that property which is close. So since it was in a matzav that he was pressed, and this Likeach came along and bought it, so now the neighbor can't go to the person and say, listen, why did you buy it? Because the pale, if the din is going to be, in other words, the Nekudas Advarim is, that if the din is going to be, that the neighbor could come along and push him off, so basically he can't really sell this property. He can't sell this property. In other words, there's no big market for the property because people aren't going to buy it because they're afraid that the neighbor is going to come along and push me away. Why should I buy a piece of property that someone is going to send me out of it? Elamai. So don't buy the piece of property, and you wait till the neighbor buys the piece of property. So normally we say taka vasisa yoshev atev. But on the other end, over here, since the moicher is pressed for money, because he wants to go ahead and be goyel or makom karev, so b'chiyah gavna, we want to give him the opportunity to be able to sell it. And by taking off the din of bar metzra, that gives him more of an opportunity to sell it, to be able to get the money, to be able to gail the makom karev. So that's why it's taken off. V'chein ha-meicher makom rachik, kedei legal makom karev. A shemacher ra, he sold something which is not such a good property. Kedei legal yafa, to be able to redeem something which is a good piece of property, b'damov. A shemacher, or he sold it, kedei litin manas hamelech, he had to give taxes, and he wanted to give the taxes quickly in order not to get in trouble. A shemacher lekvura, or he sold property in order to be able to bury someone. A lemaz in the isha abonis, or to feed his wife or children, is ein be'echad me'ela din ben hametzer. Over there, the din ben hametzer doesn't apply. El zachal alekech. The lekech is echel. V'lo me'ein b'em din ben hametzer. Why isn't there a din of ben hametzer in all these cases where the Rambam gives cases? He sold a makom rachik, they legal makom karf. He sold a makom ra, they legal makom yofa. He sold a karka, they lit manas hamelech. He sold it lekvur. He sold it mitzad maz nishav abonis. V'lo me'ein b'em din ben hametzer. Shekol elo trudin hein limker. They are Torah to sell. They're like desperate to sell. Umishum tzera gadol mechem. They're selling it because they're in a strong need to sell it. They need money. If the din is going to be that there is a din of ben hametzer, people aren't going to want to buy. So why should I go and buy a piece of property that chances are that the next door neighbor is going to go and send me away? So I'll say, normally we say, good, people won't buy, so you'll see from the neighbor. Hopefully the neighbor will buy. And if it's clear that the neighbor's not buying, then you'll sell it. But that's only, you can make such cheshbeinis when you're not pressed for time. It's not a rush to get the money. Masha'inkin, if you're pressed for time to get the money, so then you can't make those cheshbeinis. So therefore, Chazal instituted when he's selling in such a situation where he's pressed for money to get the money in order to be able to do what he has to do, so then the din of Bala Metzah doesn't apply, because the din of Metzah will apply, so that'll postpone, that'll cause that he won't be able to sell right away. Halacha Yudalef. Harei shetona leker v'amar mipnei hamas ukiyetze bei machale hamecher. So now the din is normally a person buys a property, and now the neighbor comes along to the buyer and he says, listen, I'm the next door neighbor, I want you to give me the property will be mine, and I'll pay you for the property. So normally that's the din of Bar Metzra. Now comes along the buyer and he says, listen, he sold the property because he was in desperate need. He sold the property because he had to pay taxes. But the Mal Metzra says, that's not true. He sold it to you stamazeh, and therefore really I have a right to take the karka. In other words, we don't really know. He's tiny that it was sold in order to taxes, and therefore there's no din of Bar Metzra, and the Bar Metzra is tiny that's not true. So the din is, since Lepel he bought the property, and Lepel right now he's sitting in the property. So the din is al bal hametzer lahavi raya. The person, the neighbor, has to bring the raya that it wasn't sold for mas, and v'acharkach yetz miyad aleker, that it was sold without any other reasons. It was just sold stamazeh, and then he could take him miyad aleker. V'im lehevi raya, if he doesn't bring a raya, and aleker is taining that it was sold mipnei hamas, and therefore you have no right to be misalik me, because you're a bar metzra, is then yeshav alekeh chesed. So the buyer, which is sitting in the field, and now he's a muzik in the field, he swears a shvuas chesed, and memela he stays in the field. Now, afilu hayisham b'davar safik, even if there's clearly a safik that maybe he wasn't able to, ein halekech mistalik. In other words, even over here the case is that the lekech is tining, that's what happened. And the moicher is tiny, that's not what happened. So there's no real din safik. In other words, lekech is tiny, that's what happened. And the moicher is tiny, that's not what happened. And therefore, we say that since the lekech is tiny, that's what happened. So therefore, we say that hametz mechayer avarai, lekech is a muzik. What happens if it's really a safik, if that's what happened? In other words, it's not only that the lekech is tiny and the moicher is tiny. There's a safik, there's be'emes a safik, maybe it didn't happen. So he says, afilu hayisham b'davar safik, is nevertheless ein alekech mistalik el beraya brura shevi balametzer. The balametzer has to bring a raya brura that be'emes he had no right to buy it. In other words, that the din of balametzer applies there, and only then could he be misalik the lekech and give him the money. Lefichach im toan alekech v'omar gazlin atel esodazu. It's fakir. The lekech is coming along and is tining. You're a bar metzra. Your bam is not a bar mitzvah b'chal. You know, the field that you're sitting on, which you're claiming you're a neighbor to this person, you're not a neighbor. You're a gazlan. Gazlan atal l'sodazah. Or the oris atal l'sodazah. You're not really an owner of that field. You're just a sharecropper. You're renting the field. It's a mashkin, but you're not the balabos. Is sarich balametzer lahavi raya shu balametzer. So in those, the balametzer, first of all, he has to prove that he's the balametzer. So in other words, in order for the bar metzra to be misalik the lekeach, it has to be very clear. First of all, he has to be clear that the lekeach didn't buy it in a way that gives him a right to buy it, even though there's a bar metzra. So in other words, the lekeach would have bought it in order for the moicha to pay his taxes, so the din of bar metzra doesn't apply. So it's not the lekeach's the responsibility to bring the proof that it was done in order to save the taxes. Fakert, the lekeach is a muhzik, and the bar metzra has to prove that it wasn't done in order to pay his taxes. Whereas the bar metzra has to prove that he has a right to be misalik the lekeach. And al derech zeh, if the lekeach is tiny, that the bar metzra is not a bar metzra. He's a muhzik in the karka. But on the other end, he's not a bar metzra. He's really a oris, he's a whatever. He's a seicher. He's not really an owner. So he has to prove that he has a din of an owner. He has to prove that he's an owner, and he has to prove that the lekeach had no right to buy it, and he has a right to be misalik it, and only then could he be misalik it. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hamecher liyisemim ktanim. Someone that sells it for young yisemim, ain't bei din balametzer. Over there is also no din balametzer. In other words, the whole idea of ben metzra is to do a teva yosher. It's good to give it to the neighbor. Mashenkin over here, since you're selling it to yisemim ktanim, hatei v'hayosher she'esim chesedim elu yesim balametzer. In other words, doing a teva for the yisemim is a greater mitzvah, a greater inyan than doing a teva to the neighbor. So by selling it to the neighbor, you'd be doing him a favor. Like this, he'll have two fields together. But on the other end, you're selling it to the Yisayim. That's also a good thing. If a woman is buying this field, and now the bar metzger is coming along to the woman, she bought the field, so this ain't the bar metzger. Why? For a woman to go ahead and buy things is not the derech. And Heil V'locha, since she bought the field, and Lepel now she has a field, is chesed u'shetamid ha'karka b'yod. It's a favor, it's a good thing. It's a chesed to let the woman have the field, and therefore, so the whole time of the bar metzger is that it's toiv v'yosher, that I should get it, not the other person. But when we're dealing with another person that's a yosim or an isha, so then it's a toiv v'yosher that buyer should keep the field. Now, mocher letumtum v'adregenis is again ein balametzer yochel esalkan mipnei shein safek isha, like we learned before. That when there's a safek, if you can be misalik, you can be misalik. In other words, the muhzik is the person that bought it, and now the bar metzger. The question is that the bar metzger has a right to be misalik the person. So if there's a safek, if the bar metzger has a right to be misalik the person, so you can't be misalik the person. Halacha tezayin hoisa hakarka shel echad mem. You have a piece of karka, and there is a tree or a building on this karka, trees or a building on this karka. Now the question is, does the person that owns the karka or the person that owns the trees have any schusim in the karka? So we learned before that there's sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. Depend what the deal was and how many ilonis he bought. But it basically depends what the situation is. Does he have rights to the karka? If he also has rights to the karka, so basically you have someone that owns the karka, and then you have someone that owns the trees or the house, but he also has rights to this karka. So then, so the person that owns the trees and the house is a bar metzra of the person that owns the karka, and the person that owns the karka is a bar metzra of the person that owns the trees and the house. If one of them sold his portion, is chaveri misalik alekech. That's pashut because each one is a bar metzra. The person that owns the trees and the house is also a bar metzra on the karka because he owns some of the karka. He's like a shutiv in the karka, and the person that owns the karka is a bar metzra in the trees and the house which is growing or lying on his chelik. If lepel, the person that owns the trees or the person that owns the karka has no rights to the karka, The person that owns the karka has always the right to tell the person that has the trees, either uproot your trees or get rid of your building. Umacher bal hasod, and the bal hasod sold his field, is zochal lekech. Ve'ein bal ha'ilonus, a bal labinyan, misalekesi. The person that owns the trees or the person that owns the building is not a bar metzra, and therefore he can be misalik, the buyer. However, faker the macher bal labinyan, a bal ha'ilon. So since it's lying on the karka of this person, is harei bal karka misalekesi. It's zalekesi. Halacha Yud Zayin. Now again, the din of bar metzra, the yisod of the din of bar metzra, since there's two fields next to each other, so therefore it's a toiv v'yosha. I should be able to have the two fields next to each other, be able to work on both fields together. What happens if there's something in between these two fields? They're not two fields next to each other. There's a row of palm trees that separate the two fields, or there's a building that separates the two fields, and therefore they're not really next to each other. So Eino Chinami, we're neighbors. But on the other end, the fields aren't neighboring. They're not neighboring fields. There's a tree, or there's trees, there's a row of trees, or there's a building in between the two fields, and therefore they can never really be one field. Between your field and your friend's field, there's a row of palm trees, or a strong building. A guma, or some gerz goyma means like a swampy area which you can't plant. Ukiyetseben is roim. Im yochel hachnes afilu telem echad b'teich hadover hamafsik achi is arvish te'asodas. You could make one row, and those there could be somewhere or another, even though most of the area is covered with trees or with building or whatever it is, but you could make a row that extends from one field to the other, and that would be like the connection between the two fields. There would be a row a teller would be a row that you plow on. That would be the width of a row that you could connect the two fields. Is then he's considered a bar metzra, and therefore he could, if someone else buys the field, he could claim, no, I'm the bar metzra, and therefore I'm entitled to the field. However, if there's no way of getting in even one row in between these palm trees or in between these buildings in order to be able to connect the two fields, so bebela, the two fields are two separate fields, and therefore he can't be masalik lekech. So the pashtus of this halacha is that only fields are considered bar metzra. Mashenkin, like there's a building involved, even the building belongs also to one of them. But nevertheless, that's not called bar metzra. And as a result of that, it becomes a shaila. If l'mashal the din bar metzra is taka only by fields, where you plant the fields, or let's say if you have two houses, a person owns a house, and next door there's another house, and that house, someone wants to buy that house, could the person that owns the house next door claim that since I own a house here, so Mimela, I want to also have a house next to me, I want to have two houses to each other, maybe to combine the two houses to make the two houses one. Is that a kind of bar mitzvah? Or the din of bar mitzvah only applies to fields and doesn't apply to houses? Some bring a raya from this. We see that it has to be dafka the fields. The fields are connected. The fact that it's connected through a house, that wouldn't be a connection. And others argue on the raya. It's machlekes and achrein.